The private dining room at the upscale steakhouse was dimly lit, the scent of aged leather and expensive whiskey hanging in the air. Theodore finished reviewing the contract details, a dull throb beginning behind his eyes. Across the table, his potential partner, Marcus, signaled for the next course. A young man entered, pushing a silver cart. His movements were fluid, practiced. The tailored server's waistcoat emphasized a lean frame, the fabric pulling just slightly across his shoulders as he leaned forward to present the dishes. Mr. Vance, Mr. Colton, the Chateaubriand, he announced, his voice a pleasant, clear tenor. A faint, genuine smile touched his lips as he described the sides: truffle whipped potatoes, roasted bone marrow, glazed heirloom carrots. As he reached to place the central platter, he had to stretch, the line of his back dipping in a graceful arc. Marcus's gaze, heavy and appraising, followed every shift of the server's body. Theodore felt a flicker of distaste. The deal wasn't even finalized, and already the man's notorious appetites were showing. Once the server finished and stepped back near Theodore's chair, Theodore surveyed the spread. His brow furrowed. He was certain the tasting menu had 16 courses. He mentioned the discrepancy, his tone more curious than accusatory. Marcus just chuckled, his eyes never leaving the young man. Now, Theo, don't be hard on him. He's just a kid. Probably an honest mistake. But the server spoke up, his voice suddenly softer, hesitant. He wasn't looking at Marcus, but directly at Theodore, the tips of his ears turning pink. It's not missing, sir. The final course is me. Theodore stilled, the meaning settling over him. This wasn't a standard business dinner offering. Marcus's smile turned sly. He remarked that some courses were harder to share than others, adding that since Theodore had never shown interest in such extracurriculars, he'd be happy to handle this one personally. The server, the offering, looked at Theodore with wide, anxious eyes. His face, with its full lips and clear complexion, seemed to pale. Theodore's mind supplied an unwelcome image. This young man with Marcus, whose reputation in certain downtown clubs was well known. A wave of protective disgust, sudden and sharp, rose within him. He saw the boy's teeth worrying at his own bottom lip. Theodore raised his whiskey glass, the ice clinking. He forced an easy, complicit smile. It is a dilemma, he conceded. But I wouldn't want to spoil the evening's accommodations. He said he'd accept the responsibility. Marcus's expression tightened, but he smoothly pivoted back to profit margins and equity shares. Later, when Marcus left for the restroom, Theodore massaged his temples. A hand appeared in his periphery, holding two small, wrapped lozenges. The server's eyes were bright again, the earlier fear gone. For the whiskey, sir. They help. Theodore took them. You're new. A student? The boy nodded, explaining he was a junior at the university nearby, just working to cover some urgent bills. Theodore told him to offer some to Marcus as well. The young man made a small, displeased sound, whispering that he'd rather not, that Mr. Colton's hand had wandered towards his thigh earlier. Just then, Marcus returned, and the boy fell silent, adopting a posture of submissive attentiveness beside Theodore's chair. The sudden shift was almost amusing. Marcus noted the lack of interaction, suggesting perhaps Theodore wasn't enjoying the special course, that there was no need to force it. Tired of the game, Theodore decided to end the discussion. He pulled the young man down onto his lap, one hand resting loosely on the narrow waist, the other drifting behind his back as if exploring further. He leaned close, his breath ghosting over a shell-shaped ear, and murmured a single, low-worded instruction. The boy, initially startled, quickly caught on. He let out a soft, breathy sound, perfectly pitched. It was convincingly flustered. Marcus finally dropped the subject, though he made a point of pushing several more drinks across the table before they shook hands on the deal's outline. Afterward, Theodore waited for Marcus's car to disappear into the downtown traffic before calling his own driver. He assumed the interlude was closed, a transactional favor understood by all. So he was surprised by the frantic knocking on his car window. The young man stood there, having changed into a simple gray hoodie and jeans, his hair tousled and slightly damp. He looked younger, softer. He was breathing heavily, explaining that he'd quit after tonight, but the manager insisted the first reservation had to be completed, or he'd face a hefty penalty. His eyes, a striking shade of hazel, were wide and pleading. Would Mr. Vance let him stay just for the night? Theodore rolled down the window, the city's cool night air mixing with the scent of the boy's clean, soapy skin. He pointed out that a university student had better options. He offered his assistant's number, mentioning the corporate scholarship program. But the boy just blinked. "Aren't you taking me with you?" He twisted his fingers, his cheeks flushing. He admitted it was his first time, that he'd gotten in over his head, and now he was stuck. He looked up through his lashes, the picture of a stranded, too pretty creature seeking shelter. Theodore asked if he wasn't afraid. The boy shook his head, insisting he could tell Theodore was different, was good. Theodore finally asked for a name. "Leo," the boy said. "Leo Grant." "Get in, Leo." The ride was quiet. Leo sat perfectly still, but Theodore could feel the occasional, furtive glances. He mentioned, almost absently, that he'd attended the same university just a few years prior, that the formal title wasn't necessary. Leo thought for a moment, then a small, daring smile appeared. "Teo?" he ventured. Theodore coughed. "That's familiar." He didn't correct him further. As familiar neighborhoods gave way to the university gates, Leo's posture deflated. Theodore pulled up to the curb, telling him to focus on his studies. Seeing the profound disappointment on the young man's face, something impulsive made Theodore offer his personal number. Leo's smile returned, bright and immediate, a dimple appearing in one cheek. He said goodbye with a cheerful, "See you later, Theo," before bouncing towards the campus lights. Leo seemed to have truly quit. Subsequent dinners at that steakhouse never featured him. He never used the scholarship application link Theodore texted. A niggling worry took root. Had he simply found another, less safe venue for his urgent work? "Your thoughts, Mr. Vance?" The university chancellor's voice pulled him back. They were walking across the quad, discussing an upcoming capital campaign. The formalities were done. His team would handle the details. His gaze drifted, and then caught on a familiar figure waving energetically from near the library steps. Leo was bathed in afternoon sunlight, his smile brilliant. Theodore excused himself and walked over. Leo jogged the last few steps, slightly breathless, his face flushed. He apologized for interrupting, his eyes dancing. Theodore reminded him about the name, but there was no real heat in it. Leo's expression turned hopeful. He had a performance at the upcoming homecoming celebration. Would Theo come? He was in the 10th slot. Before Theodore could answer, Leo pressed a small, elegantly wrapped bar of chocolate into his hand and darted off. Theodore examined the packaging. The script was Swiss-German. He'd seen identical bars months ago at the Grant family's lavish Hamptons party, celebrating the youngest son's return from abroad. They were custom-made, obscenely expensive. He shook his head. Leo Grant, struggling to pay bills? It was a coincidence. The Grants were old money East Coast. Their son wouldn't be playing desperate server in a midtown steakhouse. Homecoming night, Theodore found his seat. When Leo's group took the stage for a crisp, energetic jazz routine, he commanded attention. His movements were sharp, confident. During a spin, he locked eyes with Theodore and gave a quick, unmistakable wink. After the show, Theodore received a text inviting him for a celebratory meal. He found Leo backstage, alone in a corner while the rest of the dance team chattered nearby. A fragment of conversation reached him. Always gets special treatment. Think he's too good for the after-party. He said he wasn't coming anyway. A stage manager recognized Theodore and greeted him loudly. Silence fell. Theodore simply said he was there to pick up his brother for dinner. He caught Leo's surprised gaze and gestured. Hungry or not? In the car, Leo was practically vibrating, his attention a warm, steady pressure. Theodore finally told him to stop staring, that it was just a rescue. Leo asked, his voice layered with hopeful vanity, what he'd thought of the performance. His practice shirt was loose, slipping off one shoulder. Theodore tugged it back into place. You're very flexible, he remarked dryly. Leo fell silent, his ears turning crimson. The restaurant was a popular hot pot place, known for its quality and price. When the bill came, Leo's attempt to pay faltered at the total. Theodore smoothly intervened, ruffling his hair and saying growing dancers needed fuel. Later, after a long meeting, Theodore found a photo from Leo on his phone. It showed him fresh from a shower, hair damp, wearing ridiculous puppy print pajamas, grinning with a peace sign. Made it back to the dorm. Are you done working? Messages began flowing daily. Observations about bizarre cloud shapes, complaints about cafeteria food, snippets of his day. Theodore found himself responding, carving out time to try the diners Leo recommended, falling into a rhythm of nightly check-ins. One evening, plans were canceled last minute due to work. Leo was understanding, even sending a sweet goodnight text at 10. So it was a shock to see him an hour later, moving through a sleek, neon-lit cocktail bar with a tray. The server's vest here was even more constricting. Theodore watched as a patron took a glass, letting his fingers trail over Leo's hip. Theodore intercepted him in a service corridor. His voice was flat. Lying to me. Leo looked at the floor. I ran out of money. I couldn't keep letting you pay for everything. Theodore asked how long this had been going on. Just a couple shifts, Leo whispered, glancing up cautiously. He noted, with a hint of his old spirit, that he seemed to have a talent for getting caught during these particular jobs. Theodore huffed. You know how to call me for help, but not for a loan? Before Leo could answer, a call came from the bar. He promised to explain after his shift and hurried off. He worked with frantic efficiency, a blur of motion. But his looks drew notice. A man, clearly drunk and belligerent, blocked his path, demanding he sit and entertain. He grabbed Leo's wrist, his breath foul. You know who my father is? I could have you. Theodore couldn't see Leo's face clearly, but his posture had gone rigid, coldly dismissive. Then Leo's eyes found Theodore's across the room. In that split second, something in Leo's defiance seemed to waver. The drunkard yanked Leo closer, his hand groping. Something in Theodore snapped. Later, in the car, Leo was chattering, equal parts relieved and rueful. You really didn't have to hit him that hard. My manager says my pay won't cover his dental bill. I can't afford a cab back to campus now, Theo. Can I stay? Theodore's penthouse was sleek and minimalist. Leo's eyes wandered, lingering on the grand piano in the living area, a gleaming black Steinway. His fingers twitched at his sides. You play? Theodore asked. Leo shook his head quickly. No, I just appreciate beautiful things. Theodore showed him to a guest room, stating firmly that this was a one-night exception. As he turned to leave, Leo called him back. He was hugging a pillow, his expression earnest. Thank you for always stepping in. I wish I could pay you back. He took a breath, his cheeks coloring. I could be your live-in helper for a month? Cook, clean? Theodore turned, looking down at him. The borrowed pajamas were too large, slipping to reveal a collarbone. You can't even make your dorm bed. Leo looked affronted. That's not true. I'll prove it. I'll make you dinner tomorrow. True to his word, he produced a meal the next day. Perfectly seared steaks, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted asparagus. It was competent, even good. If you like it, I could make it every day, Leo said, smiling. It became a mantra. For a week, it was the same meal. Every single day. Theodore finally suggested gently that variety might be nice. The next evening, he caught Leo in the kitchen, awkwardly transferring takeout from containers onto plates. Theodore leaned in the doorway. I can increase the grocery budget. The plating effort alone must be exhausting. Leo flushed deeply, stammering an apology. Theodore looked out at the city skyline, a strange lightness in his chest. It's fine. The weather's good. Let me take you out. Days blended into a routine of easy companionship. One afternoon, waiting in his car outside the university gym, Theodore saw Leo walking with another student. The man was familiar, the one from the bar who'd touched him. They were laughing. Theodore watched for a long moment before sending a text. Leo slid into the passenger seat, radiating happiness, immediately wrapping his hands around Theodore's arm. He chattered about being starving. Theodore, his voice even, said he'd fetch something to tide him over. He returned with a warm paper bag of roasted nuts and a bottle of lemonade. He warned it was hot. Instead of taking the bag, Leo gently took Theodore's hand, examining the red mark left by the heated glass. He seemed to consider, then, with a shy determination, guided Theodore's palm to rest between his own thighs. The car's AC had made his skin cool beneath the thin fabric of his shorts. The contrast of temperature, the shocking intimacy of the contact, sent a jolt through Theodore. Leo stared straight ahead, his face now a deep pink. He murmured that this would help. Theodore's gaze was fixed on him, his throat tight. After a long moment, Leo gently moved his hand away. The inner skin of his thighs was faintly flushed. Theodore brought his fingers to his nose, catching a hint of Leo's clean, citrus scent. Leo buried his face in the bag of nuts, refusing to look up. Theodore smiled, a quiet, private thing, the earlier tension dissolving. At the restaurant, he ordered a creamy lobster bisque for Leo. When it arrived, Theodore picked up the bowl. Careful, he said, his tone deliberately casual. It's hot. He made to repeat the gesture from the car. Leo jumped, flustered, and immediately asked a passing waiter for a napkin to drape over his lap. He was adorably flustered, even ignoring his favorite soup. Theodore teased him about his sudden shyness. Leo shot back, his eyes sparkling, that Theodore's ears were redder than his, so he shouldn't pretend to be so experienced. Theodore was momentarily speechless. As Leo ate his salad, a dab of white dressing clung to the corner of his mouth. His pink tongue darted out to catch it. Theodore took a long drink of wine, trying to calm the sudden, heated rush in his veins. He pointed at his own lip. You have a little... Leo looked at him, his eyes wide and knowing. He leaned forward slightly, his voice a whisper. Do you want it? Theodore was still processing the question when Leo closed the distance, his lips brushing Theodore's in a soft, tentative kiss. It lasted only a second, but it shattered every pretense. Theodore's hand came up to cradle the back of Leo's neck, and he deepened the kiss, slow and sure. What followed felt natural, easy. Theodore allowed himself to believe in the simple narrative. A bold, charming young man who'd fallen for him. The memory of Leo with that other student faded, a minor blip. It resurfaced with jarring clarity at a party he'd been dragged to by an old friend, David. The townhouse was full of the city's trust fund crowd, a scene Theodore usually avoided. He arrived late, and as he approached the main room, he heard voices around a corner. Heard you're chasing someone seriously, Leo. Who's the lucky soul? You've been ghosting us for weeks. The charity polo match next weekend. You're not backing out for another date, are you? A low, familiar laugh answered, but the tone was different, drier, more languid. It's handled. Almost there. Theodore stopped at the hallway's end. Leaning against the wall, holding a crystal tumbler of amber liquid, was Leo. But not his Leo. His hair was styled up, revealing sharper, more arrogant angles in his face. A simple silver hoop gleamed in one ear. He wore a silk shirt, open at the collar, and an expression of bored amusement as he chatted with his peers. He looked like exactly what he was, Alexander Grant, scion of the Grant dynasty. David called out from the doorway, spotting Theodore. The group at the corner turned. Leo Alexander saw him. His posture stiffened instantly. The casually held glass was set down with a sharp click. David made introductions, awkwardly navigating the social overlap. When he gestured to Alexander, Theodore cut in, his voice cool. No introduction needed. We're well acquainted. He met the young man's startled gaze. Alexander. A word. In a quiet side room, Theodore's composure evaporated. Was the performance entertaining? Let me explain, I checked. There's no Leo Grant enrolled. You weren't even using your real name. Should I call you Alexander? Or do you prefer Leo for your games? The color drained from Alexander's face. Leo is my middle name. My mother's maiden name is Grant. I thought if you knew I was a Grant, you'd write me off immediately. So the rich kid gets his kicks pretending to be a charity case? Was there a bet? A timer on how fast you could get me into bed? Alexander flinched as if struck. The confident mask was gone, replaced by a raw, young panic. Theodore reached out, tracing the elegant brow he knew so well. He leaned close. Alexander's lips parted slightly, instinctively. Theodore laughed, a short, humorless sound. You think I'd want to kiss a liar? He turned and walked out. Driving aimlessly, his mind was a storm. He grabbed the tin of mints from his console, crushing one between his teeth. The cool burst reminded him of Leo's voice, sunny and sweet. When you're stressed, it's like I'm there with you. He threw the tin into the back seat with a curse. David called later, treading carefully. He mentioned that Alexander had gotten blindingly drunk after Theodore left, which was strange since everyone knew he had a bad reaction to alcohol. Theodore ended the call abruptly. Alcohol allergy. He hadn't known. He stared at his silent phone, willing it to light up with an excuse, a plea, anything. It stayed dark. It was past 9 when he went to retrieve his car from the office garage. A figure was slumped against the wall near his parking spot. Alexander, dressed in a faded college sweatshirt and jeans, his hair soft and unstyled, was sitting with his knees drawn up, watching the empty space where Theodore's car usually sat. His face was flushed. Theodore marched over, pulling him up by the arm and pushing back the sleeve. A rash was blooming on his forearm. Hospital. Now. Alexander pulled away, shaking his head. I'm fine. I need to rest. Can I come home? The plea was quiet, stripped of all pretense. Theodore's anger flared again. He gripped Alexander's chin, forcing his head up. Would your friends love this? The mighty Alexander Grant, begging to be taken home like a stray? He released him with a shove. Alexander didn't argue. He just nodded, turned, and began walking down the dimly lit lane. A car swung around the corner, headlights blinding. Theodore's heart lurched. He lunged forward, grabbing Alexander and yanking him back against the concrete wall. Damn it. Get in the car. Back at the penthouse, he watched Alexander swallow the antihistamine with a glass of water. His anger was now a cold, heavy lump. Sleep it off. You're gone in the morning. Understood? Alexander nodded calmly. I understand. He got up and went into the ensuite bathroom. Theodore, fuming, remembered the spare pajamas. He snatched them from a drawer and pushed the door open without knocking. Alexander was holding a toiletry bag, placing Theodore's own imported bergamot shower gel inside. I used this. I'll take it so you don't have to see it. I wouldn't have known if you hadn't said anything. The statement felt absurd as soon as he said it. You want me gone. I'm making it easier. Alexander's voice was flat, final. He moved to walk out, the bag in hand. Clean break. Maybe it's better to end on a high note. Panic, sharp and irrational, sliced through Theodore's bitterness. I never said we were breaking up. You're furious I lied. You won't listen. So we're done. He stated it as simple fact. Then explain now.
I'm listening.
Alexander paused, his brow furrowing in genuine thought. Then he shrugged, the gesture heartbreaking in its simplicity. There's nothing to explain. I'm a liar. You caught me. He moved toward the bedroom door again. Stop. Theodore's command was strained. Alexander kept walking. Desperation clawed at him. Those things are mine. You can't take them. Alexander stopped, turning a look of pure, unvarnished disdain on him. It stung more than any insult. Fine. He walked back and began replacing items on the shelves. When he had to reach for a higher shelf, the soft denim of his jeans tightened across his hips, outlining a shape that was intimately familiar. What are you looking at? Alexander asked, not calling him Theo anymore. Theodore felt a surge of petty anger. The clothes you're wearing are mine too. I'm looking at my property. I'll give them back. His fingers went to the hem of the sweatshirt. Don't, Theodore said quickly, looking away. His eyes landed on the piano. Play for me. One song. Then you can keep the clothes. Surprise flickered in Alexander's eyes. He wiped his hands on his jeans and sat at the bench. His posture transformed. He became still, focused. His hands, those elegant hands, hovered over the keys, and then he began. It was a complex, melancholic piece, filled with a yearning Theodore felt in his bones. He played with a master's touch. Every note weighted with emotion Theodore had never heard from him before. This was the real Alexander, laid bare in the music, passionate, complicated, and painfully beautiful. The last note faded. Alexander gently closed the keyboard cover and looked up, his expression once again carefully neutral. Satisfied? Theodore's heart ached. If you want to keep taking your things, he said, the words leaving him before he could reconsider, you come here and play for me. One visit, one item. Alexander came every day after that. Sometimes in the afternoon in a sharp, tailored suit. Sometimes late at night, wearing artfully ripped jeans and a tight tank top, his hair mussed, a thin silver chain around his neck. He'd pet the orange tabby cat that had taken up residence. A sick stray Alexander had found near campus and begged Theodore to care for a month ago. One night, he arrived just before midnight, eyes lined subtly, wearing a cropped top that showed a sliver of toned stomach. He bent to scratch the cat, who rolled over, and the movement hitched the fabric higher, revealing the delicate indentations of his lower back. It's midnight. You're going out? Theodore asked, his voice tight. Alexander straightened, adjusting the leather choker at his throat. New bar opened near campus. The vibe is supposed to be good. A bar requires that little fabric. You'll get cold. He gave a careless shrug. Sabar, Theo. It'll be hot. He turned to leave, then glanced back over his shoulder, his gaze lingering. You should come. I'll text you the address. Your choice. And he was gone. Theodore stood in the suddenly too quiet living room. The cat meowed at the closed door. The items in the guest room were nearly all reclaimed. What was tonight? A victory lap? The start of his search for a new target? He paced, then walked into the guest bathroom. He counted the expensive skincare bottles on the counter. 6. There were only 4 yesterday, and Alexander had taken one. He hadn't been removing them. He'd been adding his own. The realization was a thunderclap. Theodore grabbed his keys and ran. The bar was loud, pulsing with a blues rock vibe. The band on stage was all flamboyant energy. Unbuttoned shirts, sweat, and strutting. Except the bassist. His hair fell in soft waves. His shirt was buttoned neatly, but his eyes held a detached coolness as his fingers moved expertly over the strings. Then those eyes found Theodore's in the shadowed corner. A pause. Then, the barest hint of a smile touched Alexander's lips. After the set, as his bandmates signed autographs on eager fans' arms, Alexander made his way through the crowd. A confident man in a designer jacket stepped into his path. Hey, you're incredible. Want to get out of here? I can show you a really good time. Theodore was on his feet before he knew it. He shouldered between them, a forced, dangerous smile on his face.
Sorry, man.
Didn't you see? I've got the I'm begging for a second chance bouquet right here. He thrust the bouquet of deep red roses he'd grabbed from a vendor outside into Alexander's hands. Alexander looked from the flowers to Theodore's face, and his whole demeanor shifted, the cold performer melting away. The other man, seeing the change, sighed and retreated. Still popular, I see, Theodore muttered, the jealousy sour on his tongue. Alexander laughed, burying his face in the blooms. What if I told you he was another actor? Part of my grand scheme? Theodore was silent for a beat. Then you got me again. Alexander launched himself into Theodore's arms, his body fitting perfectly against him. I swear, tonight was a real coincidence. He looked up, his eyes luminous. I was hoping you'd come. Holding him, breathing in his scent, Theodore felt a month's worth of tension dissolve. Tell me, he murmured into his hair. The real reason. No more games. Just tell me what you wanted. Alexander nuzzled into his chest. I thought you'd assume it was a bet. How many days to win over the elusive Theodore Vance? How much money was on it? I don't care. If you needed me to place a bet for you, I would have. Alexander pulled back just enough to look at him. His cheeks were pink. There was no bet. He took a shaky breath. I saw you first at a gallery opening months ago. You were talking to my father, and you looked so bored and so beautiful. It was immediate. Stupid, maybe. But my friends had made crude jokes about you before. I was afraid if you knew who I was, you'd group me with them and never look at me twice. His words tumbled out now. They said men like to play the hero. So I arranged the rescue. But if you had walked away that night, if you'd let that creep have me, I would have hated you forever. You didn't. So everything after that, that was just me, falling for you. I used a few shortcuts, but the destination was always you, Theo. Theodore felt dizzy, buoyant. He tried for nonchalance. I don't mind you scheming, if it's for me. So, are we still broken up? Alexander's voice was small. Theodore feigned confusion, tightening his arms. Sweetheart, when did we ever break up? Alexander's answering smile was radiant. He wrapped his arms around Theodore's neck, nuzzling close. His shirt had ridden up in their embrace. Theodore's gaze dipped. The bar was hot, stiflingly so. Alexander followed his look. His expression was angelic, but his actions were deliberate. He took Theodore's hand and placed it flat against the bare skin of his waist, guiding it lower until his thumb settled into one of those perfect, small indentations. He rose on his toes, his lips brushing Theodore's ear, his voice a velvet promise. Then help me warm up, Theo.